All right, and greetings, my friend. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, Red Delta Project. I'm Matt Schifferly with another video to help you be fit and live free. And today we are addressing an Ask Me Anything episode. I like to open up the floor here to you folks out there in the RDP community to ask me most anything you want when it comes to this whole fitness, diet, exercise, workout reviews. If you're curious about whether or not something's worth your time, or if you're considering any sort of changes in your diet and exercise habits, like what would happen if I made this change or that change, now is your chance to ask me directly and get well, the best answers I can give you, because everything we give is based off of a basically fundamental approach that I discuss in several of my books, like Micro Workouts and Be Fit and Live Free, that is the foundation of how fitness actually works. Because so much of what gets us confused in our fitness culture is a lot of the debate and the paralysis by analysis of the back and forth of various people's opinions, saying, oh, you should do it this way, no, you should do it that way, when the reality is your results don't come from ultimately what you do, but how well you can influence the fundamental process of modern human nature that are in charge of your results. So right off the bat, we got one on here. Leona's saying, how do knuckle push-ups differ from regular ones? And the answer for that is not a whole heck of a lot. And the more important question is, does the difference actually matter to you? So basically, from a technical standpoint, this is something that is very popular in like martial arts schools and stuff, where we want to strengthen up the fist and the wrist, the muscles in the forearms, in order to teach people how to have a very good contractile force. So that way, when they hit something like a punching bag or a board or something, their hand just doesn't turn to mush. It is some degree of a tool conditioning exercise, something that's not all that common these days in martial arts, when you'd have like people hitting makiwara boards, and even back in my day we would even kind of hit brick walls and stuff in order to condition our tools. Because if you don't have much conditioning on your hands and your feet, it doesn't matter how hard you can punch, you're going to really hurt yourself if you hit something that is fairly formidable. So that's the main reason why you see it done a lot. Sometimes people will do this also if they have wrist issues, which is actually a lot of times in push-ups when people are like, oh, push-ups hurt my wrist. It has nothing to do with your wrist. It's actually very much in your back and your technique and how you're moving and stabilizing your shoulder blades. But that's a topic for another time. But a lot of times people will do push-ups on the knuckles for getting around that, and they don't have an acute bend in the wrist. And to a degree, it may arguably give you a little bit more range of motion, because being on your fist allows you to drop down a little bit more, although that's usually something that doesn't really matter that much in most cases in my experience, because a lot of times when people use things that allow a bigger range of motion, many people fail to even use it in the first place. Like when they're doing things on like push-up handles or parallel bars, they're like, oh yeah, I can get deeper, but if you actually watch them train, they don't get deeper. In fact, a lot of times they actually use a shallower range of motion, because instead of coming down to the floor in the back of their hands or to the floor with their chest, they don't have that kind of kinesthetic awareness of their depth anymore. So they think they're getting lower and they're actually getting more shallow. So those are the bigger things that you're looking at. Another thing too is sometimes when you do them on your fist, people will naturally use more of a vertical grip, as I like to call it, or a neutral grip. And because of that, it's easier for the shoulders to come down and back, the elbows to stay in. So it's a little bit easier for some people to use really good, solid scapular motion in their push-ups. So overall, it's one of those things that does it really matter very much? Probably not. As I always say, unless it matters to you. You may go into doing knuckle push-ups and be like, oh, wow, these are the greatest things since sliced bread and really helps me with my boxing and stuff. If you feel like you get a benefit from it, go for it. There's certainly not a reason not to do it. Although I will argue that a lot of push-up progressions require that your hands eventually get underneath your chest, like archer push-ups and one-arm push-ups and stuff. And yeah, I know you can do them out to the side, but they get pretty wonky and stuff. So eventually having your hands flat on the floor is still going to need to be in your repertoire to at least some degree. All right, let us see what else we got here. Lots of questions here. It's funny, I wrote up a bunch of questions myself thinking, hey, what if nobody comes and asks me questions? And suddenly it's like, boom, right down the here. You guys like these episodes? I should do these more often. But Ben, whoops, is asking, hey, Matt, do you do lateral raises and face pulls? Thanks for the content. No, I don't. Honestly, I don't think they're really worthwhile. I think most of the shoulder motion or development that we get can be certainly had with basic compound pressing, pike push-ups, handstand push-ups, variations and stuff. I do rear flies on suspension straps. That's very good as well. I don't think there's anything like with the knuckle push-ups, anything wrong with it, but ultimately I don't really find these things to be all that worthwhile or effective. In fact, I would say, okay, if you're doing like face pulls, like I know that was a big thing with the whole Athlean X and Jeff Cavalier camp for a while. If you do an exercise like that and you're like, holy smokes, that makes a really big difference, that's an opportunity for you to be like, okay, why is it making a difference? And why is that difference not also present in other things that I'm doing? Like when you do face pulls, you get some external rotation in your shoulders. Well, why aren't you getting that external rotation otherwise and stuff? So they're fine to do, but no, I don't do them. I don't really have any desire to do them. It's like a lot of things where I play with them every once in a while, and my reaction is always, eh. I don't get it. I'm not really getting anything out of this aside from what I usually get anyway. So again, go by your experience though. Always remember, folks, that my opinion means jack squat on these sorts of things, because ultimately the information you really need to know about what's going to work best for you is going to come from your experience, not my opinion, which really doesn't matter worth a hill of beans, right? So if you try face pulls, if you try knuckle push-ups, you try something, you're like, wow, holy smokes, that is amazing. That is so awesome for me. Well, there's your answer. That's what you should be doing. Angelo saying, Matt, what's your best advice for people who just can't stay consistent with exercise? Oh, I love this question. Actually, it's funny because I've been thinking of a thing that I needed to say in my videos and stuff, and this is a perfect opportunity for me to do it. I actually recorded a video the other day on the ski slopes and I did not post it. I just remembered that. But consistency is a myth, my friends. I'm going to say that again. Consistency is a myth. It does not exist. And you'd be saying, like, what are you talking about? I do 100 push-ups a day. Yes, that is true, but that's not what matters. The consistency of your habits is not what's important. It's the consistency of the stimulus in your training, or the consistency of your habits as far as diet goes to satisfy your appetites. That's what matters. Because as I address in my adaptive training manuals and stuff, you never train the same body twice. And this is the point I was making when I was on the ski slope. I was like, look, it's a foot of powder. It's sunny. It's warm. It's, you know, there are all these different things about the conditions that day that were different from every other day of skiing I'd had that year. I have never skied the same mountain twice. Yes, I always ski up at Winter Park. And yes, my main stomping ground is Mary Jane. But I've never skied the same mountain twice because it's always different. And the same is case with you, my friend. Every single time you do an exercise, even if you're like, I do 100 push-ups every day, your joints are different, your muscles are different, your focus is different, your emotions are different. Everything is different to some degree. So even though you're like, I'm consistent, I do 100 push-ups a day, your actual ability to train your body is not, and it can't be, and it never will be, because there's always something different and changing around. So when it comes to your consistency, don't worry too much about like, oh, I got to do this thing every day, or I've got to do this every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or whatever like that. Instead, focus on consistently trying to get whatever you can for your objectives. Okay, so if your objective with diet is to make sure that you're eating protein, plant, and portion size at each meal, that's not too hard to do. But whether or not you're getting that from McDonald's cheeseburgers, from a protein standpoint, or kale salad, or you're eating enough to satisfy and so forth, that's what matters most. And that's the whole point of adaptive training, is actually you don't want to necessarily be all that consistent. Because if you say, I'm going to train 100 push-ups every single day, you are then making that rule in charge rather than actually trying to have an effective workout. Yeah, again, I'm going to say that one more time. If you have a rule of consistency, like I'm going to do 100 push-ups every single day, you no longer care about getting results. You no longer care about building muscle and strength. You care about doing 100 push-ups every day. Now, when you change to an objective-based approach and you're like, oh, I want to stimulate muscle growth or building strength in my muscles, suddenly that 100 push-ups a day seems like a pretty stupid thing to do. Because some days you're going to be like, man, I am tired, I'm exhausted, I just don't feel like it. Are you going to be able to stimulate much strength in the muscles when you get down and your muscles are achy and your joints are creaking? No. So why bother doing it? If you are really exhausted and you're having trouble challenging your work capacity, are you able to stimulate much in the order of muscle growth? Not a whole lot. So again, are you consistent in achieving those objectives? No. So the consistency of the habit doesn't really matter very much. So back to your question, just to put a bow on it, can't stay consistent with exercise. I would say you're probably following something that demands more than you can consistently do. Okay, like I can't do 100 push-ups every single day. I can't eat, a raw salmon every single day. Whatever the rule is, well, then get rid of the rule. Don't put the rule in charge. You should be the one in charge. If you're having trouble staying consistent with being able to do something for achieving those objectives, it's not a good plan, full stop. People will sometimes say things like, oh, if I set my mind to it and I've really got the motivation and I've really got everything set, then I can be consistent. Any plan you have trouble following is a bad plan. It's a crappy workout program. It's a crappy diet plan if you have trouble sticking to it. And that's why the old saying does ring true. If you can't commit to something big, commit to something small. It's like, oh, I can't, eat perfectly well every single day. I have trouble with consistent diet. Can you consistently get protein at each meal? Yeah, that's easy. Well, then do that then. And then you can build off of that. Find something you can be, quote, consistent with, and always keep those fundamental objectives in mind first and foremost, because that's what determines your results, not whether or not you eat organic food or do 100 push-ups every single day. Those are just, again, general guidelines that can be a good thing to base your habits off of, but that's not what's ultimately going to determine your success. Can you eat in a more satisfying way? Can you be physically active most days of the week in a way that creates the stimulus you want? That's all you need. That's all you need. And that's why when I first started doing adaptive training, I haven't stuck to a regular, consistent workout program in years. And I've never had consistency in my workouts for the past like 3-4 years because I don't need it. It doesn't matter. Can I relatively consistently get the stimulus that I'm after? Absolutely. Even though sometimes I'll work out once a week, a muscle group, or twice a week, or 3 times a week, or whatever, doesn't matter. Can I consistently just tell my muscles, contract hard for strength, contract hard for strength? Doesn't matter what I'm doing, doesn't matter how I'm doing it, but I can consistently get that stimulus, and that's what matters. So have more of a focus on consistency as far as the objectives you're going after, not necessarily what the habits are for that objective. All right. Do you think reps in reserve 1 to 3 should be doubled or even tripled past 30 reps? Oh, this is a great question. I have been doing high rep push-ups, 35, 30, 25, 20, so on. And notice 1 to 3 reps from failure tanks following sets and reps. Thoughts? Yeah, always remember that, again, it goes for what objective you're trying to achieve in your training. But the more you push into the red zone, meaning you're really grinding out those reps, the less energy you're going to have for exercise. So if you're in a situation where you're like, oh, it's a race to see who can do 100 push-ups, you want to stay well away from that point where you're really grinding. Now, when you're doing high rep training, that's going to be more repetitions there, right? If you get a really heavy resistance, you're going to get, your solid reps, and then you're going to get a grind rep because rep 4 to 5 is just brutal on your system and it's going to really fatigue you. But when you go into higher repetitions, you're training at a much lower intensity level. So those grind reps, quote unquote, that are really exhausting you are going to be more reps towards the end. So if you're like max, let's say, is 30 push-ups, you're going to be grinding out those reps 25, 26, 27, 28. So it may, in that regard, pay to have more reps in reserve, as you rightfully say, because those are going to be more exhausting. The higher reps you go, the more reps you have that are going to be more exhausting. So if you need to have more energy for subsequent sets, then yes, you want to save a few more reps in the tank. I'll just say, though, again, that I think people are pretty piss poor at estimating how many reps they have left in the tank. Gosh, a nickel for every time someone's like, oh, I saved a rep in the tank. And then I have them go all out and they get like 6 more reps than they did before. I'm like, no, you saved like 5 reps in the tank. You didn't quite save 1. So it's a really subjective thing to go after. It's certainly not concrete by any stretch, but do know that, yeah, if you're going higher repetitions, you're lower intensity, you're going to want to save more to stay out of that fatigue zone. If your goal for that workout wants to stay away from the fatigue rather than chase after it, like if you're going after like hypertrophy or something. Ollie G saying, if I'd only do 1 set a day, like chin-ups, dips, squats every other day, only body weight, am I going to see results? No possible way to know, my friend. Because remember, your results don't come from your workout program. It doesn't come from the exercises you do or anything like that. It's how well you're achieving a fundamental stimulus. And I don't even know what results you're going for here. Endurance, strength, improved technique, hypertrophy. I'm assuming hypertrophy because that's usually what people are after and building muscle. But there's too many unknowns to be able to definitively say here. But remember, folks, your objective is what determines your success. Are you contracting your muscles harder? That's how you get stronger. Are you pushing your muscular stamina? That's how you build endurance. Are you challenging your muscular work capacity and really pushing the muscle to produce more energy at a given level of resistance? That's one of the primary drivers for hypertrophy. So if you're doing that, then I guess, depending on what objective you're after. But we've got to be very careful, folks. Just because you're doing a particular workout or working your tail off does not in any way guarantee that you are going to be successful in achieving what you want. You want to make sure that you understand the fundamental objective you're going after. And that's what's great about having an objective-based approach that I talk about in all of my programs. When you understand what that objective is, almost every question you could ever come across will be fairly easy to figure out for you personally, right? What if I did 100 push-ups? What if I worked out every day? What if I worked out once a week? What if I did this? It's real easy to figure out pretty much everything because it all boils down to, does it help me achieve that fundamental objective? And the answer should probably be either oh yeah, it's definitely going to help me, or it's probably not going to help, in which case that gives you your answer on whether or not it's going to be effective or not. And that's one of the biggest advantages of having an objective-based approach versus what most people do, which is a diet-based approach or a workout program approach or a hard work approach, where the goal is not to achieve the objective that's responsible for results. The goal is to follow the workout routine. Cross your fingers, hope like blind luck that it's going to work for you, because there's so many variables in all cases that can influence whether or not it's going to work or not. So that's why it's very hard to answer questions on whether or not something's going to be effective, because it depends on 15 other things. Advice on how to activate the abdominals. Yes, one of the most basic ways to do this, because abs are like your lats. A lot of people have trouble engaging and activating that muscle group. And as I've addressed many times, if you have trouble activating and contracting a muscle proactively, your chances of being able to make it bigger and stronger are practically zilch. You have very little chance of getting anything out of whatever you ever do. But it also goes the other way around. You improve that activation and your chances of success increase dramatically, even if you have the world's worst technique and the world's worst program. So activation of the abs, and you could just kind of sit and try and contract. That's always a good way to kind of understand how well your activation is. But one of the easiest isometrics, because isometrics are one of the best ways to activate sleeping muscles, is all you got to do is just place your hands or your elbows on a sturdy like countertop in front of you and tighten up your back and push down into the countertop with your hands or your arms, with your abdominals. That's all you got to do. Dead bugs are also a good technique for this. So you lay on your back, you tuck your knees up towards your chest, you put your forearms against your thighs, and then you just crunch the two together with everything you've got, again, driving with your abdominals. And those isometrics are really good for activating your abs. Now, just because you can engage a muscle in an isometric is a good start, but it's not enough. Then you need to also be able to engage and proactively maintain the tension in the muscle through a range of motion. So once you've got that, then you can practice leg raises, sit-ups, ab wheel, things like that, proactively engaging your abdominals and trying to maintain that tension to a very high degree while you do the exercise. So warm up with the dead bugs, warm up with pressing down into the table. And if you're like, I think I'm engaging my muscles, when in that case, the answer is no, you're not really doing a very good job of it. Muscle engagement should be extremely obvious. So I recommend practicing like the downward tabletop press or dead bugs and stuff many, many times. Remember, we're trying to improve the objective of proficiency, and proficiency comes with practice. Lots of practice, lots of frequency. So practice it every day, several times a day if you can. And that's going to do a lot for you. It's Buddha. Hey. Good to see you. Any advice for uneven pecs? My left chest is bigger than my right chest. First off, being able to, muscular development is often asymmetrical in general. Like lack of symmetry, and professional bodybuilders are always trying to fix this sort of thing. It's very normal and natural to have one side slightly bigger or smaller than the other. In fact, if they were dead even, that's like freakishly unusual kind of thing. So know that's normal to a degree. The other thing too is it's usually a sign of something about your technique, and something about how you're applying pressure into your chest is a little bit different whenever you're doing your main primary pressing movements. I would bet money though that it's a back activation thing, because the ability to stabilize and pack your shoulders down is what gives your chest the stability to work off of. So look at a videotape. You whip out your smartphone, have someone film you doing push-ups or chest flies or whatever. Take a look at your shoulders. I'm pretty confident that your smaller side probably has some slight elevation and or protraction of that shoulder blade. So your shoulders up and forward just a little bit. That's very common, very, very common, myself especially. And a lot of it comes from habitual things about how we use our shoulders. Me, I grew up in the 90s in grade school and high school. So every single day we would take a really big, heavy backpack full of these things called books, and I would load it on my right shoulder and do this all day, every day, like Quasimodo. I would have my shoulder elevated and protracted as I'm like lumbering around with like 30 pounds of books on that shoulder every day. And you do that for like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And it's no wonder that my right shoulder is habitually more protracted and elevated whenever I'm pressing, which is why my right side is weaker. So I've been working very hard to correct that, and I've made a lot of progress with it. So think of like how you're using your shoulders as well. Are you a single shoulder backpack holder? Are you always like sleeping or on, sitting like this where your shoulder is forward and elevated? Be aware of these sorts of things, because we can try and correct stuff when you're exercising, but if you're not aware of the habits that are contributing to that throughout the day and addressing those, then it's just going to be perpetually affecting you very much. Mr. Pink, interesting question. If eccentric contraction is so effective, what happened to Nautilus flywheels and hydraulic exercise machines? Well, two things to address there. One is, who says it's effective? Okay, so a lot of times, like you'll get people who are really big on negatives, eccentric training and stuff, because and this is my experience, but years ago it was like, oh, when you're doing eccentric training, that's where most of your muscle damage comes from. And therefore we had this like Monty Python reasoning kind of thing of like muscle damage creates, or eccentric causes muscle damage. Muscle damage is what stimulates hypertrophy. Therefore, eccentric is where you get your most muscle growth. These days, that's been shown largely to be just bunk. Muscle damage is somewhat correlated to the stimulus for hypertrophy, but it's not exact. In fact, it depends on the exercise and depends on what you're doing. But the more important question is, what happened to the Nautilus flywheels and hydraulic exercise machines? And I think a big part of that is the Nautilus flywheels largely just got, I'm trying to think of the word, basically everybody adopted them. You look at almost every single weight machine in existence, and there's some sort of a Nautilus cam kind of flywheel in almost everything now. I even work with a client who's got a brand new gym in her business, in her Like she works at a big corporation. They just bought in all this new hoist equipment, and the actual weight machines move the seat that you're on. So instead of like having a cam flywheel, it physically moves you there. So the resistance curve changes as you're doing the exercise. It's kind of a wild machine, and hydraulic exercise machines and so on. Depends on the hydraulics. Some hydraulic machines only give you resistance on the concentric, and then there's nothing on the eccentric. Some of them can be reversed, and some of them just make it like regular lifting. And to that end, I think that's why, is because a lot of times the weight machines, especially the Nautilus ones and stuff, because they had kind of a premium on the brand name and stuff. And I used to work at a couple gyms that had those hydraulic machines, and they were ungodly expensive. I mean, we're talking $30,000 for a leg press machine. And so when you're basically setting up a corporate gym and you've got a budget to work with, you're like, well, we can go with this machine, which is $30,000 and it requires hydraulic pumps and everything, which is another $50,000. Or we could just do this general basic one from Life Fitness for $3,000, right? So I think a lot of times people have tried to outsmart the human body with a lot of technology and stuff. And the bottom line is it's just gotten to be really complicated, really expensive, and not really all that beneficial compared to just more general stuff that people have used. I mean, I grew up in the fitness industry selling exercise equipment. And when I got into it, like we were selling weight machines like hotcakes. It got to the point where there were several models of weight machines that we would sell, and I could build the entire machine completely from memory. I didn't need to look at the instructions. You could hold up, okay, 3 1/4 inch bolt with white or blue Loctite on it. Where exactly in the machine does that bolt go? And I could tell you every time. So we sold a ton of them. But by the time that I kind of got out of the industry, you couldn't sell a weight machine to save your life, because people were just like into the basic dumbbells, kettlebells, gymnastics rings, suspension trainers. If people were buying weight machines, they didn't want to buy an $8,000 do everything kind of machine. It was kind of like, yeah, just give me a basic lat pull down machine, with some weight plates on it, and that's all I really want, or a, kind of a cable based functional trainer. So I think basically the whole focus on eccentric training has largely gone by the wayside because it doesn't really pan out and do much. And the machines and everything that you mentioned are just basically kind of growing obsolete. We just don't need them as much. And you may find more of them in specialty applications like physical therapy and stuff. You see that a lot in physical therapy areas where they got big cams that they can adjust, because there it matters more. But for the average user, I don't think it really is worthwhile. And things that aren't worthwhile disappear. Joseph Bello, good to see you. Does it matter if you only take a 20 or 30-second rest, or should someone rest longer for a minute or two for muscle growth? As I addressed in last week's episode, I'm always telling people rest is needed. Don't force yourself into a static amount of rest or trying to hack something, because there's so many variables that go into play of how much rest you should rest for, depending on what your goal is, depending on what the exercise is, depending on your environment, depending on your condition level, depending on what kind of condition you're in for that day and stuff. So that's why I'm always saying just rest however you need to rest. Don't think you're going to make much difference in your workout by perfectly dialing in, like, oh, instead of resting for 40 seconds, I rest for 20 seconds, and instead of this amount, I got that amount. It reminds me, years ago there was this guy who worked out at one of the early gyms I was at, and he was asking me about 90-second rest protocols. And I was like, where are you getting 90 seconds from? Is that from a magazine or something? Because that was that long ago. And he's like, no, Jay Cutler said the reason why he's so big is because he rests 90 seconds in between sets. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that's why he's that big. And I'm sure if I wear, Air Jordans, I'm going to play like, Kobe Bryant or something. It's like, that's not why he's that big. No, you're talking about something that's got about that much influence over your result. So rest as needed. You're more about getting a good set. Focus more. Again, this is where objective training comes from. What's the objective you're trying to achieve in that set? And then sometimes you're going to be able to achieve your objective better with more rest, sometimes less rest. But that's why having an objective-based approach, it basically solves all of your problems. Lendog with the He-Man saying, Matt, how do you manage your anxiety? At times it kills me. Several things. I had a lot of issues with anxiety over the past couple of years and continued to be in therapy about managing it and understanding where it's coming from. But here's a couple of takeaways that I think can have helped me at least a lot. Number one is focus on your locus of control, as they call it. What can you control? What can't you? A lot of times we have anxiety over things we don't have any control over. And it's like, oh, you hear what they're doing, with in the government and big corporations and stuff. Look, there's nothing I can do about that. There's not really anything I can handle with that, so it doesn't matter. For me personally, I had a lot of anxiety over a social situation a few years ago. There was nothing I could do about it. But I noticed that I felt really good if I went home and I cleaned my bathroom. If I went home and I was like, I don't like this shirt in my wardrobe. It doesn't fit right or anything. Okay, get rid of the shirt. I'm going to donate it to the Goodwill or whatever. I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy 3 shirts that I feel amazing in, right? It doesn't matter about the actual thing I was anxious about. No, but it does give me more of a framework of this I can do something about. This I can control. I can't control what this person thinks it says and does or anything like that. And I know people are like, well, if you can't control it, ignore it. Yeah, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. That's like saying, don't compare yourself to other people. It ain't going to happen, okay? It's a part of being human. But the more you focus your attention on what you can control, the less attention you're going to put towards things you can't. And that's what matters, because your attention is your most valuable resource by far. Okay. And the more you put your attention towards things you can control and things, more importantly, you can improve, the less you're going to think about the things that are causing you so much of the anxiety. And more importantly, maybe you can do something about it. It's like, oh, I'm so anxious about getting to work on time or something of that nature, right? Sometimes we have anxiety over something that we can have some control over. All right. So it helps to make a list. Sometimes we have anxiety because our head is just, oh, there's like 20 different things I got to remember all at once. Get it on paper, get it on a smartphone app. So that way it's not in your head anymore. If like, okay, in order for me to make this thing happen, I need these things to happen. And you lay it out the step-by-step approach. Like, okay, first thing I need to do is I need to get in touch with Mary from accounting. And what do I need to do? I need to ask her these 3 questions. Okay, get it on paper. That way you see it, it's in front of you. You have more locus of control that way and that sort of thing. Because it's very important, folks, to have more influence over the things we expose ourselves to. These days, it's no secret that it's like, oh, we've got algorithms on the internet, we got social media, and we've got news and everything. Well, we have to recognize we can control a lot of our exposure to this stuff. First and foremost, you can control how much you just have your eyeballs on it. Like, I never watch the news, ever. Like, I don't have a TV, I don't have local cable, I don't have TV shows or anything like that. So that is part of my control. Second of all, we always have to remember that we control the algorithms on the internet. People make it sound like, oh, the algorithms are totally in charge of our lives and stuff. No, it's the other way around. I saw a video the other day of this guy who did an experiment. He's like, I'm going to create an Instagram channel, and I want to see how long it takes me to teach the algorithm only send me videos of cute, fluffy farm animals, particularly like bunny rabbits. And he's like, took me 15 minutes. My feed is nothing but bunny rabbits right now. He's like, I taught the algorithm, that's what I want to see. So every time the algorithm was like, hey, do you want to see this video about, carpentry? It's like, no, thumbs down, swipe real quick. And, oh, hey, there's a cute donkey. Okay, I'm going to watch this and I'm going to like it, right? You teach the algorithm. Well, people talk about social media being so destructive and damaging and stuff like that. But the fact is, the social media and the algorithms are doing the exact same thing that everything in life in the media has done to human beings since the dawn of time. It's just happening at a faster rate of speed. You can go through a social media feed and in 10 minutes get exposed to 20 different ideas. It's no different than what we used to have back in the day. It was slower when you had newspapers and magazines and everything like that. So because it's faster, it can be extremely damaging and cause you a lot of anxiety and manipulate your emotions in a very bad place. But when you focus on your locus of control of, I'm going to tell the algorithm what I want to see and what I don't want to see, then you have control. Now you're using it for your benefit. So that's the benefit of the locus of control, both in taking control of health and fitness and in diet, because it's very easy to get focused on the things you can't control. Like, it's very easy fodder, to get, it's like, oh, governments are putting this food dye in our food. It's like, so what? Who cares? Like, so many people out there are talking about how it's like, are they gonna get rid of high fructose corn syrup and replace it with regular cane sugar? I don't care, because honestly, it doesn't matter. It's not going to matter. It's like Coca-Cola is not suddenly going to become healthier because it's made with cane sugar. It's going to be Coca-Cola. It's going to be the same thing as it was before. It's going to have a tiny little difference, which honestly does not matter, but it is up to my locus of control on whether or not I'm drinking 5 Coca-Colas a day. That's what matters. That's what's going to determine if I'm healthy or not. Whether the government's putting that high fructose corn syrup in Coca-Cola, it doesn't matter. It's whether I'm drinking the soda that matters. Focus on your locus of control, and that's where you're going to have much less of your anxiety. David Baker is asking, what's roughly a % of isometric exercises versus dynamic? It varies. I would say generally it's about 80 to 90% dynamic. Isometrics are usually more of a supplemental approach for me. But sometimes I'll go on like an isometrics binge, which I have been actually, funny enough, over the past week, where I'm almost all doing isometrics. It's kind of like deload weeks. When people talk about deload weeks, I'm like, all right, I'm not going to do any dynamic stuff other than maybe demonstrating something in a gym. And I'm just going to work out on the isomax every workout. And it's a nice way to just kind of hit a neural reset for me. It's refreshing, it's fun, feels good, empowering, always seems to make noticeable improvements in my physique. So when I'm doing that, it's 100% pretty much isometrics. And that's usually a couple of weeks, and then I flip the script back around. Crash saying, how hard is an all isometric only workout on recovery compared to traditional strength and hypertrophy workout with moderate to high intensity? It's much easier on recovery. That's one of the huge benefits of isometric training, is that it's much less harsh and damaging on the body. And again, as I addressed earlier, we thought, oh, muscle damage, that's what creates our hypertrophy. And we want to beat and thrash and bash and trash the body into oblivion, when it's not hard work and stress that creates a stimulus, or the changes we see. It's the actual stimulus. And it's kind of like you want to almost look at the damage and the stress and the need for recovery as almost like collateral for wear and tear on the body that you go through for the stimulus you're trying to create. So if you can create the stimulus with far less damage and stress on the body, that is huge. I mean, there are a lot of people, they even speculate that one of the big reasons why some drugs and steroids and stuff can really help you build muscle and strength is because it helps you recover so much faster. So you almost want to look at the stress and the wear and tear and the damage you got to recover from is almost more of a liability, not something you seek after. And because isometrics creates so much less stress, the idea is that you don't need nearly as much recovery, so you can work out a muscle group hard. Instead of once or twice a week, you can hit it like 5 or 6 times a week. So you're creating a stimulus more frequently. Again, it's always about speed because you can recover so much faster. And that's one of the huge advantages of it for that sort of thing. So recovery from isometrics, much better. And again, it depends though. If you're doing isometrics for the first time, you're fairly deconditioned, you're going to need more recovery, because you don't need to recover from exercise. You recover from wear and tear, from stress, from damage. So if you do an exercise or a workout and it kicks your butt, you need more recovery. But if you do a workout and you're like, I'm good, I'm fairly fresh from that, well, you don't need as much recovery. Congratulations. Again, rest as needed. Doesn't just apply to in between sets, it also applies to in between workouts. Magnus, good to see you, my friend, as always. Saying, hey, Matt, do you have any experience in dealing with jumper's knee? Any advice on how to get rid of it? Cheers from Norway. Good to hear from you, sir. No experience from jumper's knee, but I will give you the standard reply, is that typically when we have stress in a joint, it means a muscle's not doing its job. And a lot of times for jumpers, it's either quads are not engaging properly or glutes and hamstrings, particularly on the landing. Okay, so when you are jumping, you should be really aware of using your hips. your glutes and your hamstrings big time. Also, tape yourself. Yeah, that's how old I am, right? I refer to taking a video as taping because back in the day, video was on tape. But record yourself jumping in slow motion. We all have these slow motion apps on our phones now, right? So record yourself jumping and watch your landing. Are your knees buckling in, out? Are you landing and your knees are just kind of like hitting with a hard impact before they finally start to bend? Look at it in slow motion, and there may be a glaring thing in your technique that would make you go like, oh, sweet Lord, how in the world are my knees not shattering on impact kind of thing? There may be something there. You can observe a lot by watching, as Yogi Berra always says. Vera L, it's good to see you. At what age or point in a man's life does progressive overload will come to an end? Never, potentially, because progressive overload can take so many different forms, my friend. Okay, so I'm assuming, sometimes it's like weight. All right, how much weight can you lift kind of thing. But there's also reps, there's sets, there's technique. Progression is always something we can strive for. It's just different directions and avenues and stuff. And it's not going to be an age thing either. It's going to be much more dependent upon conditioning and motivation and proficiency and how long you've been training a particular thing. Those are the things that are going to be far more dependent. I mean, you could be 82 years old and still be putting more weight on the bar because you're like, oh, I just started powerlifting last week. Yeah, of course you're going to be going after weight like crazy because you're fresh on powerlifting moves. But you're 85 years old. It doesn't matter. So it's not an age thing. It's more of an experience thing. And are you focusing too much on a single avenue of progression? And like weight or reps, and not also looking at other things that you can potentially improve, like technique, range of motion, tension control, stability, all these other sorts of things that can also be very much influential to how hard your muscles are working. Gromit saying, this is interesting. Is like I really like to train 6 days a week, kind of because I like the pump. Yeah, I get you there. I still make sure it's intense. Today I did 5x3 on the pull-ups. One unassisted pull-up is a lot for me. Very good. Then hip thrust, negative pull-ups. Yeah, sure, man. Go for it. Go for it. A lot of times the point of training is just to feel good. Right, to get the pump, to de-stress a little bit. The other night I was having a really kind of night, and there was a lot of frustration and a lot of just like, I can't stand it. And I was getting some isometrics in, and it's like, I'm not here for strength. I'm not here for muscle. I'm not here for, I just want to like unleash some of this frustrated energy out. So a lot of times when we go into our workouts and we're like, I'm just doing this purely to feel good. Well, there you go. That's more than enough reason for it. Have fun with it. Have fun with it. We get in trouble when we get dogmatic about it. That's when we get in trouble. We're like, I have to do these push-ups today, even though my body is exhausted and my joints hurt and I have no motivation for it. That's when we get into trouble. But otherwise, yeah, if you want to go for it, go for it. Hell yeah. Baltali saying, hey, Matt, how can I get stronger without getting bigger? Stay away from failure, my friend. So remember, strength is not about necessarily just muscle size. It's also about contractile strength. So use techniques that require a lot of tension in the muscle. Okay, keep the reps low, high resistance. So that way you can have that high contractile force. If you do 1,000 push-ups, that's still a fairly weak push-up because you're not using a lot of tension in the muscle. But if you're doing things like archer push-ups or with a weighted vest and you're like, yeah, I can maybe get 4 reps, very good. So get 2 and stay away from failure because it's going after that degree of fatigue that is one of the bigger influences towards stimulating hypertrophy. And the second you start getting tired, you're done. You're done with the sets. But stay away from the fatigue and just get that muscle contracting super, super hard. Super Chiquitas, good to see you, my friend. And I intend to do Grease the Groove to increase my hold times for static exercise. Grease the Groove approach suitable for this plan. I plan to hold only a small percentage of my max multiple times a day. Yeah, so Grease the Groove is just another word for frequent practice. So when you're talking about trying to be improving your proficiency, that's the objective there, then yeah, it can be good for you. Just make sure that you don't assume you're going to be good at it just because you're practicing. Practice doesn't make perfect, practice just makes permanent. So make sure you're focusing on still trying to improve things like your technique, what muscles you're engaging, proper muscle tension irradiation throughout your body. So if you're holding for, like, say, front lever, are your lats engaging? Are you using your traps? Are you engaging your deltoids and your triceps and good strong grip and your abs and stuff? Are you breathing properly? Practice is good, but you want mindful practice. That's the important thing. Don't just assume that doing a front lever 5 times a day every day is going to make you really good at front lever. It might, but it's going to be much more likely that it's going to help you if you go into each session going like, this is what I'm trying to improve. That's where your stimulus for improvement is going to be for that sort of thing. Miguel is saying, what would be a good time under tension? No way to know. Depends on what you're trying to go after. What's your objective? What type of stimulus are you trying to create? As I said before, if you're going for strength, it's going to be pretty short. So only a few seconds. If you're going for endurance, it's going to be much longer. If you're going for hypertrophy, it's going to be, well, give me what you got. As I tell my clients sometimes, how many pull-ups should I do? I don't know. Do what you can. I will tell. That's my favorite thing. Now, how many push-ups should I do? I will tell you when you can stop. You keep going until I tell you to stop, kind of thing. Because if I give you just a random number, know that I'm just guessing. You know, I might as well program your workout on a Ouija board. It's like, I don't know, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds, I don't know, kind of thing. Nothing to base the decision off of, because again, without knowing what objective we're going after, it's like following a compass without a needle. Which way's north? Somewhere, kind of thing. So it depends on what you're going after, but usually it depends on high tension for strength, high time for endurance, combination of the two, hypertrophy. Rhea saying, hey, Matt, what would you say are big 3 of ring training for hypertrophy? Also, what is better for working on carries and hinges at home, buckets or sandbags? Thank you very much. First off, sandbags. Oh, okay. Sandbags in buckets. No, that's sandbags are awesome for carries because they're unwieldy. Buckets are meant to be carried. Sandbags are good for the grip strength. They're a live load depending on how soft it is. You generally can get your sandbags to be much heavier than a bucket too. I've known people in the past who are like, okay, I've got buckets that I'm filling with sand or gravel. And it's like, at the most, I'm carrying 20 pounds. But you can get sandbags to be 100, 150, 300. I saw a guy once who had a 400-pound sandbag. I mean, it was big, but holy cow, what are you lifting, a cow? Dear Lord, that is big, big, big. So sandbags for the win on that one. And a big 3 for ring training. Obviously, we got dips, we've got pull-ups, and I would say combination of some sort of a like a horizontal push and pull. I know that's 2 things technically, but that's what I would throw in. And basically compound pushing and pulling for mass, or actually, you know, your hover lunges and pistol squats and stuff supported with that for your legs. Duh, I'm thinking upper body, but you didn't specify that. So yeah, pull-ups, dips, some sort of lunge, single leg squatting variation that makes your whole leg go absolutely crazy. All right. And then follows up saying, also, if you have time, do you think training on rings 2 reps in reserves 3 times a week too much or just right? I would say, why are you putting reps in reserve? You're going for hypertrophy. Blast the mother living hell out of those muscles. You know, because again, reps in reserve for a lot of people, failure is just such a subjective thing. So that's why I tell people, don't worry about it. Reps in reserve if you need to pace yourself, if you need to hold yourself back. But if you're going for muscle, blast it. Just absolutely go for it. You know, really just make it go for a good amount of effort there. 3 times a week is good. I mean, 99.9% of the time for most people when they're working out, 2 to 3 times a week is going to be your sweet spot. And it's going to work almost always. But by all means, change it to whatever you like. Like we just talked about a guy who's like, I work out 5 days a week. Yeah, great, awesome, wonderful, go for it. And someone else could be like, I run and I do sports and everything. So working out my legs, for example, once a week is still going to be a lot for me. Like, okay, do it once a week, go on a case by case basis. Remember, my friends, there are very few rules when it comes to fitness that you actually have to follow. And that's a good thing. It's very open source. Do whatever you want and do whatever you can to achieve those objectives. If that means working out every day, great. If that means doing it once a week, great. Because that's what's important. Go after those objectives that I talk about in Be Fit and Live Free and my micro workouts and stuff. I've got new articles, by the way, on those three objectives, the three fundamental objectives of training. I'm going to be making videos too in the next week on those. So make sure you're subscribed here, and also check out reddeltaproject.com for those blog posts as well, because that's the stuff you should structure every decision you ever make about your training off of, because it's going to make things real simple and much more clear for effectiveness. Tito Not Macho. It's good to see ya. I'm doing high rep calisthenics routine. Is 3 or 4 times a week enough? Who the hell knows? What are you trying to do with that? And more importantly, what is your experience with it? Remember, it doesn't come down to how much you work, folks. When you don't know what your objective is, the hard work itself becomes the objective, which is a very, very dangerous game to play. Because the moment you make hard work and effort your goal, that tells me you don't know what you're doing. And I'm speaking from experience, because in many areas of my life, not just fitness, I've I'm going to be so working hard. I'm going to work my tail off and stuff. Just recently, I've recognized that I'm working way harder than I should be in many areas of my life. And I'm like, damn it. You know what that means, Matt? It means you don't know what you're doing. That's what it means. Because when you strive for the hard work, when you strive to work as hard as possible, it means you don't know what you're doing. So never make the hard work the goal. The hard work is just the cost of it, right? It's like making it a goal to burn as much gasoline as possible, or electricity in some cases, when you're trying to drive to work. And it's like, I don't have a goal of burning gas. Why in the world would I want to make burning gas my goal? I want to get to work. And hell, if I can get to work and burn less gas, that would be a good thing. You want to take the same mentality when it comes to working out. You want to work out as little as possible and still achieve your objectives. Because hard work is not an asset. It is a straight up liability. It is not a good thing. Hard work is nothing more than the expenditure of resources, time, energy, focus, motivation. The more you have to work for something, the worse off you're going to be. So anytime you can use a shortcut, as I discussed in an earlier video, to get a level of productivity with less work, that's good. In fact, in most cases, the only way you can get to what you want to do is to figure out how to work out less and still maintain that productivity. So we don't want to make hard work our goal. It's not something we want to strive for. It's following up saying, thanks so much for your input. All you do. Logging off, coming back in a bit. All this is interesting as heck. Remember, my friends, that I do post these. It's on the YouTube channel, Red Delta Project's YouTube channel. So you can always come back to this and rewatch it and take notes and things like that. They're all of my podcasts that I've done for the past 19 years or whatever are there. Also, I post the audio of these and the transcripts on your podcast directory of choice, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, that sort of thing. So if you miss anything or you want to check things in, you're more than welcome to check those out there as well. Also, don't forget that I also put these into the Delta Digest, my weekly newsletter that I come out with on Monday, and that has the 9 rules and laws of building muscle with calisthenics when you sign up for that as well. So, a little shameless plug there. Eva, it's good to see you. How are you? So good to see you coming on in. Thank you very much. All right, Cristobal. I love this question. Recommendations for a minimalist home gym. Well, it depends on what kind of exercise you want to do, right? And it depends on what you like to use. Right? Minimalist home gym? Yeah, get a kettlebell. You're done. Right? I've known people like that. I know people, they're like, I've got a kettlebell sitting in the corner. That's all I got. Or you could take a bit of a progressive calisthenics approach, and they're like, yep, doorway pull-up bar. That's all. That's all I need, kind of thing. Or like the duonomic doorway handles that I recommend on the site, and maybe some rings. Me personally, if you had to ask, just this is what I would do. Nosk suspension setup, right? They've got a couple different models. This is their twin trainer. I think I'm going to also reinvest in their RT17, the rope trainer, because I feel like playing around on that again. But they've got several different models, best in the industry, folks. Best quality, best design, best prices, NOSC all the way home. So that's what I would do. If I had to just start off from zero, I would start off, I just get a NOSC twin trainer, and that would pretty much be the bulk of what I would use. I'd also have, Kensui weight vest, although I haven't used that thing in a dog's age myself. Haven't been doing a lot of weighted calisthenics stuff lately. Just haven't really needed to. I haven't really felt the need to. But the twin trainer is also, you can use it as isometric straps as well in a pinch. So that's why I would go with that. North Star, is full body weight training, circuit training effective? Absolutely. Remember, every workout is effective, my friends. Every workout you ever do is 100% effective 100% of the time for every single person. That's because fundamentally, the real job a workout is supposed to do for you is to make sure you can do the workout. That's fundamentally what training does. You are telling your body, I need you to be able to do this thing. And so if you build a circuit of push, pull, squat, 3 rounds through of 5 to 10 reps, that's what you're telling your body to do. And that's going to be very effective for that regard. Whether or not it's effective for a different objective, well, that's a whole nother can of worms. And again, that's why you want to be focused on what kind of objective are you going after: calorie burn, neuromuscular conditioning, or improving in proficiency. Those are the 3 fundamental objectives. You understand what those are. You have every answer you're probably going to need for the rest of your life when it comes to effective training and programming. So what kind of objectives are you going after? And therefore we can base what kind of programming and circuit training you're doing off of that. Eva is saying, hey, Matt, it's great to see you doing Q&A. I want to do these more often, folks. I think they're just more productive. And I love chatting with you folks. I really love doing this every week, saying, great. Any tips to deal with performance anxiety, putting too much pressure on yourself in your training? Many thanks. So this is similar to what we were talking about earlier, folks. All right, performance anxiety is, again, focusing too much on the outcomes a lot of times. I go into a bike race and I'm all anxious about it, like, oh gosh, I want to win and I hope I don't crash. And what if my chain breaks? And what if my tires are at the wrong tire pressure? All right, there's a million things that can go wrong and often do in the middle of a bike race. So what do you focus on? You focus on your locus of control. Can you control the outcome of a particular event? No, there are far too many influences that are just totally outside your control that you have nothing you can possibly do anything about. And that's why you're anxious, because you're trying to get some semblance of control over something you can't. So you stay focused on what you can control. Well, I can inspect my chain and make sure it's lubricated so it doesn't break. Okay. Is that going to guarantee my chain won't break? No, but it's definitely something I can do to try and minimize that. Right? Can I control whether or not I'm going to win this race? No. Can I control whether or not I put in a good effort on the first lap? Yes. Okay, focus on that. So you focus on what you can control and your ability to do things to the best of your ability. And the actual outcomes, it's a little bit up to chance. But, even if it doesn't pan out the way you want, there's a lot of peace that comes from knowing it's like, yeah, I crossed all my T's, I dotted all my I's, I did as good as I could. Just wasn't in the cards for me today. And we need to make peace with that because a lot of the rhetoric that tries to sell us on products and services and stuff in life tries to give us the sense of like, no, you can have control. You can control your weight with 100% certainty. You can control your health. You can control what your body looks like. And the fact is that's just simply not true. There are always lots of variables that are completely outside your control you can't do anything with. And there's peace with knowing that knowing we will never have full control, but you can have more control by focusing on your locus of control, looking around your environment and like, okay, what can I do something with here? And that is where we can find greater degrees of peace as well. Let's see what we have here. We deserve better. Amen to that, son. Do you think having a 24-hour fitness trackers like Whoop and continuous sticking to wrist and Bluetooth can adversely affect our electromagnetic body systems? I would say if it probably did, we would have figured it out by now. We've got a lot of really good setups to actually measure these things. And like anything in science, we're testing the hell out of everything. And if there was something there, we probably would have found it by now. So I would say probably not, especially nowadays. Like electronics use so little energy. It's ridiculous. I mean, the air tags, you charge them up and they last like months or something like that. It's crazy how little energy these things use and the signals that are out there. And for signals, like we've had signals around us all the time. People are like, well, we've got like, radio waves and everything. We've had radio waves bombarding this planet since the Big Bang. Well, since a planet formed after the Big Bang and stuff. So electromagnetic interference and everything is always around us. It always has been around us. So these devices that we carry around, they're nothing new that it's creating. So I would say, not that I'm an expert in the thing, so my opinion means almost jack squat, but don't worry about it. You're probably much more going to get an adverse reaction from just standing in the sun too long, or subjecting your mind to something in your environment that's really detrimental to your psyche or something like that. So it's probably not something we need to worry about. And if it is, we probably would have figured it out by now. The best bodyweight exercise for glutes and hamstrings, hip bridges, my friends. Hip bridges is hip hinges, right? It's not about the exercise. It's about the movement and the muscle engagement in order to accomplish the movement. So whatever tools you're using, you want to think of your basic movement pattern, in which case, your glutes and your hamstrings are very much involved in hip extension. Creating that hip forward thrusting motion. So the actual exercise and the actual tools that you use are much, much less important. It's, are you getting that movement or motion? And are you, more importantly, able to properly engage the muscles to a high degree while you're doing it? So in that regard, like anything can be a very effective glute and hamstring exercise that involves hip extension or isometric hip extension, but you've got to make sure you have good engagement of those muscles to begin with. And you may very well find that you can engage them better from some exercises than others. So I can engage my glutes and hamstrings much better on hip bridges than I can on deadlifts. Maybe that's a thing about me. Maybe that's just a practice thing. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's when you do an exercise and you're like, whoa, I feel it in my glutes. That's telling you something. And if you do something that's like, well, this is supposed to be, according to this expert on the internet, the best glute exercise ever, but I don't really feel it. Well, that's telling you what you need to know there as well. To hell with what we think. It's what you experience that matters the most. So just focus on that hip extension and then proactively engage the muscles for that hip extension for the purpose of those things. And that's going to get you what you want. JGW2 saying, do you prefer the Isoloop strap for lower body or the Dragon Door Iso Max? Also, your preference for one or the other on single leg movements. My primary focus is joint health and athletic power. It's kind of a little too much of a, apples to oranges kind of comparison. Because fundamentally, you're pretty much doing the same thing with your muscles either way. So it's, again, down to preference. You can be a little bit more versatile in the setup of the the ISO loop or the ISO trainer. The ISO Max is more solid, like a barbell. Also gives you the quantifiable nature that can be very beneficial as well. So it's here and there, up and down, left and right. Probably doesn't matter one way or the other too much. My preference is just the ISO Max, typically, just because I like the fact that it gives me the quantifiable nature more for time than anything else. Right? If I'm using an ISO trainer or ISO loop, I've got to watch a clock or something. But the ISO Max gives me quantifiable time increments. And that is very beneficial. It's just a little less work that I got to do in that regard for me to make sure that I am getting what I want out of that. Anthony Cohen's World saying, is it okay if I stop increasing the weights / difficulty of exercise when I work out? I don't see the point of always going higher. In any ways, I injure myself when I do. Well, again, it all boils down to what are your objectives that you're going after? And if you're seeing detrimental effects when it comes to adding load, I would say something is definitely not quite right in the programming and what you're going after. That's perfectly fine. I was talking earlier about what I engage in called a freeze workout. A freeze workout is where I tell my clients, you're not allowed to add anything to it. You can't do more sets, you can't do more reps, and you can't lift more weight. And that focuses them on proficiency. How well are you doing the exercise? How well you're engaging the muscles, range of tension, stability, control, range of motion. There's 20 other things that you can do to make progress in an exercise that have nothing to do with weight and reps or sets. And so you're mentioning like you're adding weight and you're injuring yourself. So I would bet dollars to donuts that you need to make some improvements and changes in some of those other subjective variables for sure, because those things also, they're the things that keep you safe. And something's not quite right with that. So you may want to look into getting some one-on-one coaching to help assessment of things like technique and control and stability, muscle activation. So yeah, I think it's a very good idea for right now, is having some of those other softer subjective things that you're addressing. And so, finally, Super Chiquita saying, how do you use kettlebells? I've seen people combine strength training with cardio in a HIIT format. What do you do? I don't use kettlebells very much anymore. Fundamentally, they're primarily an extension chain exercise. So I prefer hip bridges. So that pretty much wipes out like 90% of the stuff that people do with them. You know, cleans, swings, single arm swings, snatches and stuff. It's also just a, you know, availability kind of thing. Like, we don't really have the best kettlebells here at where I work, where I live. One of the gyms I work at is a bodyweight gym, doesn't even have kettlebells, and the other gym has okay kettlebells kind of thing. So I just don't use them. I don't really have clients use them. If we do, it's swings. And if that's the case, we want explosive hip extension. And that's why we would use it, kind of thing. If we were looking for cardio, I would go with a bunch of other variables before weighted stuff. Attack bikes, rowing machines, crawling, sled pushes, sprinting, hill climbs, jump rope, kickboxing, that sort of thing. In general, I'm definitely a fan of, like, it's better to do cardio without weight, and much better if it can be cyclical, you know, involving some sort of a round cycling kind of motion. It's just so much easier on the body. There's so much lower risk of injury. It's just so much easier on the mind. You can do it longer. You can burn more. You can get your intensity to a much higher degree. So that's usually, if I'm going after cardio and I want to get my heart rate up, that's what I'll err on. It's just a lot easier to program and stuff. Vera L is asking, when's the next podcast? So I try, my friends, to be as consistent as I can, of course. Saturdays, 2:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Mountain Time, Saturdays. Next week, though, I'm going to be in a Taekwondo tournament, and so I won't be able to do it then, but I'll probably do it the following Sunday. Although those tournaments, sometimes they do get over pretty quick. So I may still do it Saturday next week. It'll just be later. Always remember, check the Red Delta Project Instagram, where I post where I'm going to have the time and the topic for the day as well. I need to get better about that. I'm always posting it like 15 minutes before, which I know is not giving you much of a notice. So I'm going to make a note to myself to do better about that in the morning. I'm going to post a thing saying when I'm going to probably have it, what the topic will be, and then that'll give you a heads up and you'll know when to do it. I'm going to start doing that. But on that note, I am going to vamoose, my friends. I hope you have a great week. Good. Best of luck in your workouts this week as well. Don't forget to check out, subscribe to Red Delta Project YouTube channel here and on the podcast and stuff, because I've got a lot more videos on things that I was mentioning before. Link down below for all the equipment recommendations I had and the books and everything that I was mentioning as well. And you're looking at, you know, all the resources are on reddeltaproject.com. So thank you very much, folks. I will talk to you next week. Until then, be fit and live free.